Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word. I want to speak in strong opposition to this reckless bill and the abundance of extraneous and irresponsible provisions that it contains. Right now, we're down to the wire on defaulting on our debt. But instead of focusing on a way forward, the majority is offering up this ill-conceived piece of legislation, a bill that is polluted, and I emphasize polluted, with unrelated and inappropriate riders that do not belong in a spending bill. The reality is that these riders will have very little impact on our national deficit, but they will have a huge and lasting effect on our health, our environment, and our natural resources. So why are these programs being targeted? Well, we've seen this before with H.R. 1 earlier this year, and we're seeing it again now. The majority is choosing to reward big oil and polluters at the expense of the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the wildlife and wild places we hold dear. Mr. Chairman, it's not an exaggeration to say that this bill drastically undermines our government's ability to protect our environment. This bill jeopardizes the conservation and protection of places like the Channel Islands National Park in my congressional district and the wildlife this special place harbors, closing a quarter of national wildlife refuges across the country, affecting places like the Guadalupe Dunes near Santa Maria, slashing support for federal programs that support our outstanding natural areas, like the Piedras Blancas Light Station or the Carrizo Plain National Monument in California, opening up protected and sensitive areas in California's national forests to off-road vehicle use, putting places like Los Padres National Forest at risk, and blocking the protection of wilderness quality lands. And as the bill stands, Mr. Chairman, it would bar new listings of threatened and endangered species as well as critical habitat designations. And it would gut the successful Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is our nation's principal source of federal funding to preserve irreplaceable lands and waters. Under this disaster of a bill, the LWCF would be reduced to the lowest level in its 45-year history, an 80% cut compared to last year's funding. And who will benefit from this cut? Not the American taxpayer, because this fund is paid for from offshore drilling revenues. Instead, communities will lose important conservation and recreation projects that create jobs and improve the quality of life for working and middle-class Americans. But this assault isn't limited to our lands and wildlife. This dirty legislation is also littered with riders that seek to get the protections of the Clean Water and Clean Air Acts, such as preventing the EPA from strengthening limitations on polluted storm water runoff, blocking the EPA's oversight on water use by power plants, impeding the clarification of which streams and wetlands are protected under the Act. Under the House spending plan, the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds will also see significant cuts. These are the funds established for states to complete water infrastructure projects which create jobs and provide clean, safe drinking water. The riders in this bill, Mr. Chairman, are also an assault on the very air we breathe. They would prevent the EPA from limiting carbon pollution from power plants and other stationary sources, from updating limits on smog and mercury emissions. Or one rider would block the EPA from setting new mileage standards for cars and won't even allow the state of California to set its own standards. Surely we can think of better solutions rather than attacking our air, our water, and our lands. Sadly, this Interior Appropriations Bill deeply undermines our important role of passing on an America whose land, water, and air are clean, healthy, productive, beautiful, and accessible for all to enjoy. I strongly urge my colleagues to vote no on this terrible, terrible bill. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields.